Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is a most fabulous, fabulous morning. At least it's morning by me, so good day. Celebrating life, celebrating the wonderfulness of life. And the magic of it, and the moreness of it. Let me just get it all set up and arranged. And then we'll get going. And we get going. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful indeed. There we go. It's all live. So yeah, just the little things that I got to do. I got to mark it as featured and then share it to the guide. Little things like that, just so that it's all done. Fiddly stuff, but what can you do? It's just part of the deal, part of the deal. It just helps to for more people to see it and make it available. It just takes a little while, unfortunately. So after I pin it to featured, then I've got to refresh the page so that I can pin it to the top. Just the way Facebook is, won't let you do it right away. It's too funny. All right, so I want to continue with payoffs. We did this last week, we did some of it, but it's such a big topic. And I'm hoping Shir is going to come, because this was a big topic for her too. Let me just take. Oh. I'll be shouting at her. Okay. Payoffs. So with payoffs here, I'm saying is, why do we do things? Because we get some kind of a reward. And I use the word payoff because in this context, it's a little bit on the, you could almost say squirrely. Cheryl is here, brilliant, brilliant. Hello, Cheryl, fantastic, fantastic. Hello, Norma, I'm glad you're here too, Norma, most excellent. I'm glad you found me, Norma, very good. And I'm glad I found you too. So very wonderful. I'm so pleased you're both here. Most excellent, most excellent. So what I'm saying when it comes to payoffs, and why I use the word payoffs rather than rewards, because, a payoff has that connotation, implication that it's kind of a little bit squirrely. And that's exactly why I use that. So we do things, we have behaviors, and there are payoffs for those behaviors. And that's what I'm paying attention to here now. So the particular behavior I'm paying attention to is anxiety and worry, of course, because that's the course that we're doing, freedom from anxiety and worry. However, in the case of payoffs, this applies to any behavior, particularly things that are we do, but we like anxiety and worry. We do them and we know that it's not ideal to do it, but we do it anyway. It's like, I know I shouldn't worry, but I worry anyway. I know I shouldn't feel sorry for myself, but I do it anyway. So in other words, these payoffs apply to such types of activities, right? Self-doubt, anxiety, worry, self-pity, all sorts of stuff like that. And why is it a payoff? Because the reward is a reward in inverted commas. It's not really a reward. It's just bogus. It's bullshit, in other words, right? And sometimes, well, there are legitimate payoffs for it, but just because it's a legitimate payoff doesn't mean it's worth the effort that you put into it. So for instance, I might have a business and I make money, and okay, I make a couple of $1,000s. Well, if that's over the course of a year, that might not be worth it for my business. But I could say, yeah, but I didn't make money. You see, yeah, it's that kind of logic that we have to be sure that what we get out of it is really worth the effort that we put into it, right? It's a very, very big deal. So, of course, Norma, you know already, ask questions. Cheryl, you know this too. Make comments, interrupt me anytime. You guys are both, of course, welcome to come on Zoom. This is always great. So feel free to join me there if you want. All right, so I'm going to share screen so we can see this here. I know some people don't want me to share screen, but can't be helped. Can't be helped. It's just the way it is. And we got to go through this. Well, all right. I suppose I could do this without sharing screen. So last week when we started on the payoffs, I said, well, what are the payoffs? And for anxiety and worry. And I'm going to go through them real quick, the start ones, and then continue where I left off. Right. So I said attention, comfort, caution, importance, priority, getting heard, perception of caring, stress release, attempted guilt elimination, disguise, satisfaction, avoiding responsibility, belief in betterness, superiority, passive control, protection, something to do, loneliness protection, connectedness, concentration, preparedness, problem recognition, community, being part of something, doing good, feeling something. So we stopped about there more or less last year. So I'm going to, because we went into those in detail last time. So if you want to know more about those, and just go into the guides tab. And under this, oh, I put it in the wrong tab this time, but anyway, I'll fix that later. So in the guides tab, you'll see last week's over there. So these are payoffs for anxiety and worry. So we're getting here feeling something, emphasized something as a payoff. Some people's lives are devoid of feeling, right? They numb because they've felt too much. They've had horror and terror and horrible stuff, negativity in their lives, so they've shut down. So they need to feel something. And safe anxiety and worry, this is a very safe activity, because who can really say, well, you know, it's a bad thing to do? Well, because by implication, if I'm worrying, I'm concerned about stuff, I'm showing that I'm caring. These are all payoffs that we said earlier. So this is a very safe way in the bubble logic, right, of anxiety and worry. It's a safe way to feel something, anything. If you're not feeling something is better than feeling nothing at all. Yes. And I think some who are watching this or listening to this might resonate with that, right? And say, oh yes, I hear you there. You know, I've been there where I just wanted to feel anything, whatever it is, just wanted to feel anything, right? And that's because we've shut down our feelings so much, and we're afraid to feel. We're afraid to feel things like joy, because, well, you may have been in a situation where if you did feel joy, you got smacked down for it. You or showing caring, same thing. You know, any positive emotions, if you were in a circumstance, an environment where you had lots of negative people, and particularly people that are stuck on the superiority paradigm, if you're happy, you show them up by comparison, by contrast, right? In other words, if you're happy and they're not, what does that make them? In their mind, because they're always comparing, because they have that hierarchy mindset, well, now you're making me look bad. They're unable to be happy on their own. So, of course, they have to make you less happy than them. They have to make you more miserable than them, so that they now relatively look better. It's idiotic mindset, but it's sadly a reality in life. So many children get absolutely suppressed in being their moreness, because the adults in their lives don't want them to be more, because they make the adults look like less. Right? Does that make sense? Cheryl, no, please let me know in chat there. Does it make sense what I'm saying? I'm taking a bit of a detour. I'm going to come back to the payoff of feeling something, right? It's all connected here. Hey, Ramsey, good to have you here too, man. Good to have you here. Hello, hello, hello. Wonderful, wonderful. So this point I'm making about this. So tell me, Norma and Cheryl, if that makes sense. Bingo, exactly. I thought you would connect with that. Wonderful. Girish is here as well. Girish Saban. Wonderful, Girish. All right, very cool. I'm glad to see you guys here. So this is wonderful. This is wonderful. Yes, truly, yes, exactly. So when we realize this, that we were pressured when we were young, we were pressured to be in ways which said, do not be your natural self, do not be your good self. It's like, well, wait a minute. Now that I'm saying this, it's like, okay, I know, I understand why, because people didn't want to get shown up. They were utterly ridiculously crappy, right? But when we were young, your parents, adults, teachers, whoever, authority teachers, ministers, priests, religious leaders, whatever, you cannot possibly imagine that they would be this ridiculously crappy and just terrible, right? And absurd. It's preposterous. And so we need to understand preposterousness does exist. People do preposterous things. Now, sometimes they learn and grow and change later, but other times not, right? Bina's here too. Wonderful. Hello, Bina. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Exactly. The Vivian, as I like to call her. This is her story, precisely. Comparative mindset, pushing others down to make herself look better by comparison. This is it. It's total that BMN, bullshit manipulator, narcissist logic, right? So this is what BMNs do: superiority paradigm, hierarchy, dominance, all of this stuff. I have to be better. I cannot look bad, and they're all about ego and status and all this rubbish. It's terrible. But the cost on children can be profound, because the children are taught, do not feel, don't show anything, because, well, in this case, we started off with positivity. They show joy and happiness and they got shut down, right? Because makes them other people bad. But also, you can't show negativity, because lo and behold, the day you criticize these people with their sensitive egos, that is absolutely intolerant. It's not tolerated also. So you can't feel anything. You have to just be neutral. You have to be nothing. You have to be not seen, not heard. You can't really exist. You mustn't exist. And that's what some of those people, they should never be parents, right? They don't actually want kids. They don't like kids. They don't want their kids near them. Exactly. It is a very terrible game, Abina, Norma. It's a very horrible game. Yes. It's a very mean and nasty game too. But people think this is what they should do. They really believe in the should of ego. You should be important. You should be special. You should be better than everybody else. No, absolutely not. There's no need for that. Absolutely not. It's absolute complete rubbish. And you get showered with love and affection and support whenever you fail. Oh, yes, exactly. Exactly. You get reinforced for failing, because the BMN says, wow, wonderful, you failed. Oh, shame, you poor dear. And they're drawing lots of attention to the fact, but of course, they're emphasizing that you failed. It's ridiculous. Exactly. That's a very good point, Cheryl. Very, very powerful point. Yeah, exactly. So we have this background voice, as Giri says, a background voice born in childhood due to surrounded people, precisely. So we get this background voice that says, don't feel, don't put yourself out there, don't really do anything, just be a nothing. And so as a result, we tend to shut down and we get closed. But we need to feel. This is part of our human condition. We cannot avoid feeling. So when it comes to feeling, we start to find ways that are acceptable to feel. Now, think about anxiety and worry. In that type of an environment, well, you're worried about stuff. Well, okay, that doesn't make you special. It doesn't make you good. It doesn't make you wonderful. It doesn't make you better than me, because, yes, worrying is sort of normal and all this. So it's sort of okay to worry. You can get away with worrying. And worrying or anxiety, it allows you to feel. And of course, like Cheryl said, you get showered with love and affection and support when you fail, because the emphasis is on you failing, and look, I'm better than you, and you failing. Oh, yeah, you poor dear. Of course, I don't say it out loud, but it's by implication. So the same thing with anxiety and worry. If I'm being anxious and worrying, the BMN say, oh, cool, they're not happy and they're all anxious and worried, they're stressing. Well, good, that's it. They don't show me up, they don't make me look bad. This is fine, because, worrying and stressing and this is kind of crappy. So, okay, so go ahead and worry, and they'll support it. Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry, dear. It will all be okay. And it gives them the opportunity to be the nice one in your life and support you. But really, again, it's like supporting you when you fail. This is a huge point that Cheryl made, right? That you are supported when you fail. And you get this positive association. It's a huge, huge, huge point. Only self-awareness is key to manage self. Exactly. You cannot use somebody else's awareness on your own. And that's why the number one task in doing Way of Impeccability or any of my programs is, before you get to repeatbacks and takeaways and dictionary power, all that stuff, all the actual doings, physical doings. The first task of doing is self-honesty and honesty. You can't go anywhere if you're not honest or self-honest. And of course, those BMNs who push this nonsense, they're not honest because they're saying, well, look, I'm trying to be wonderful, but relative to you. As long as you're worse than me, this makes me okay. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Just because I'm relatively better than you doesn't make me actually good. It just makes me relatively better. In other words, it makes me less worse. But to them, less worse is better than, and that's all they're interested in, better than, not actually being good. So they are quite happy to be just slightly less crappy than you. Dude, I got news for you. You're still crappy. Yeah, but I'm less crappy than you. Yeah, but you're still crappy. Yeah, but I'm less crappy. Yeah, but you're still crappy. They don't get it. They don't understand that they are still crappy. As long as they're less crappy than somebody else, this is supposedly okay. What ridiculous logic. I mean, it's a terrible disease of the mind, this belief in that you've got to be superior to somebody in the hierarchy. You don't have to be good. You just got to be not at the very bottom. It's absurd. It's a totally horrible, ridiculous logic. So yes, self-awareness, absolutely key. Absolutely key. Please share some self-talk and overthinking points. I will, Girish. I'll get to that in a moment. So, so when I want to make this point because my theme is about. I'll show you what I'm dealing with today, Girish. So to put it into the bigger context, what I'm going through my course on freedom from anxiety and worry. That's what the course is called, and we're in module 3, and we're going through module 3 at the moment. And what this is these are all the payoffs for anxiety and worry. It's very important to understand why we do what is a foolish behavior and a self-detrimental behavior. Why do we do it? There are payoffs for it. Now, the point why I said payoffs is because a payoff is something that is kind of, a bit squirrely. It's not genuine. It's not legitimate. It's not a true reward. A true reward has no downside to it. But a payoff, of course, has a downside to it. Because if you get caught accepting a payoff, you're in trouble, right? The payoff is like a bribe, right? So these are like almost like self-bribes, but you've got to keep it a little bit quiet, and you can't really have it in full awareness, and because it's just BS, really, right? When you get down to it. So the point we're on here is feeling something. People will engage in anxiety and worry because it gets them to feel something. Because in this long story, as we said now, they have had experiences in their past where they could not feel, where the entirety of the world was against them, and they have this association and this conditioning to not feel. So they have to find a safe way to feel. Anxiety and worry becomes a safe way to feel, right? Which gets to the next point, getting sympathy. Same thing. If I'm all anxious and worried, what happens? Like Cheryl said, you get rewarded for failing, but in the same thing, you get rewarded for worrying and being anxious, right? Oh, you poor dear, it's okay, you poor baby. And they feeling all superior to you because you're the one with the problem, and of course they the one who solves your problem, makes them better. So you get rewarded for this. So sympathy is something that gets pushed as being an acceptable way for you to get attention and you to feel stuff and you to get something going on, right? In the same way. So avoiding incompetence. This is a very powerful point. Let me come out of screen sharing here again. In anxiety and worry, if I'm always worried that things aren't going to work, this allows me to avoid dealing with my own incompetence. You say, well, how does that work? But if you think about it, you'll see the thing, the logic here. If I know I'm not particularly competent, and I haven't made any effort to be competent because I don't want to take risk. I don't want to make work. I don't want to make effort. I don't want to learn. I'm too afraid to fail. So I don't want to ever learn. This is a really terrible thing to be. It just blows my mind that people don't want to learn because they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to admit they're ignorant or wrong. Well, that's what learning is. Every time you learn, you realize, well, I didn't really know what was going on before. So I was ignorant. I was stupid. I was foolish. I was wrong, whatever. But they're so hung up with their egos, they can't learn. Anyway, so if for whatever reason, if they a little bit on the incompetent side and they have this fear of failure, of course, they don't want to do the thing that requires their competence without having some kind of a safety net. right? So if I say, well, let's just say I'm going to change the tire, yeah, and I never changed the tire in my life before, a tire of a vehicle, a car, right? I got a flat wheel instead of calling AAA or whatever, right? If you don't have that available, because, AAA, some people take this for granted, like, wow, but many places in the world, you don't have this option, or it's very expensive. So talking to international audience here, right? It's not always available. Anyway, I mean, when I was a kid, it was unthinkable to call somebody to come and change your tire. You got a flat tire, you change it yourself. It was like just it was it. There was no problem to it. And it didn't matter, man, woman, didn't matter. You just changed it. So that was it. Right? Anyway, so but now let's assume that you all are hung up about your ego and your status and your competence. Oh, I never changed the tire. Well, it's not much to it. It's a very simple procedure, really. You just got to do it. But they're so afraid that they're going to fail that they're going to worry. Oh, I don't think I can do it. Oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Oh, I don't think it's going to work. Oh, I have all the stuff coming. It's like a preemptive safety. So if they do fail, they say, well, you see, I knew I wasn't going to succeed. So now they write about their worries, even though, it takes the attention away from the fact that, well, you were just incompetent and lazy and squirrely, right? So this is why this is a payoff. This as anxiety and worry. One of the payoffs is that it is preventative or preemptive against your incompetence. So it's to avoid incompetence exposure. That's the full payoff, to avoid incompetence exposure, right? So you're setting yourself up to fail. When does making space in your thoughts for someone or something you care about become a payoff? Is any amount of worry or concern a selfless act? Oh, that's a great question, Cheryl. So yes, it depends on why you are doing this, right? So if you've got space in your thoughts for somebody you care about, right? When does it become a payoff? It becomes a payoff in inverted commas when you're doing that to boost your ego. You say, well, I'm caring for them because look at me, I'm a very caring person. It's that look at me part that causes the problem, right? So when you're doing it for attention, when you're doing it for bogus reasons, if you care, you don't care that anybody sees that you care. Nobody needs to know that you care. You just care. You do things, and if you truly care about somebody, you'll do things that are good for them without any benefit or reward to you. Nobody needs to know about it. You'll just do it because you care. That's it. That's the only reason, right? There's no other reason for it. So in that case, you can, I suppose, if you're sitting there privately, you're worried or concerned about them, it could be a selfless act. But here's the problem with that, Cheryl. Think of your thoughts and your attention and your energy. They don't just exist in a vacuum, right? Your thoughts, your attentions, they affect the world around you. So if you care about me, please do not sit there pushing out worries about me, because you're adding a negative intent to the entire greater reality, see, which is now an intent that I have to work against, because it all mushes together in the energy reality, which has no time and space. Yeah. So when you worry about somebody, you're basically saying, I don't have confidence in you. I don't have trust in you. If you truly care about me, have trust and confidence in me. If you think, well, I'm not prepared, then as a friend, then share, say, look, so, you're going to go into doing this thing, whatever it is. Okay, you want to change a big 18-wheelers tires or something. Well, there's other things that you need to know here. It's not like changing a car tire. It's more complicated. You have to have special jacks and all this. So it's like, hey, dude, you think you can do this based on the car, but it's not the same, right? For argument's sake now. Right. So then tell me and say, well, you need to learn more. So in other words, that is being, rather than anxiety and worry, that's care and concern, which translates into action. So that can be a selfless act, care and concern. But worry, no. Worry is concern with negative attitude and mood thrown into it. So exactly, causing negative intent. But I want to emphasize the difference between concern and worry, right? If I'm concerned about you, I have a legitimate a question or a doubt that something might not go the way you think it does, right? it may be legitimate. It's like, dude, you think you're going to do this, but you're misinformed, and well, you're going to get into trouble. That's concern. Worry is when I add negative feeling to this, negative emotionality, right? I mean, I can be concerned. I can say, well, that ain't going to work. And, I'm watching you do this. And okay, like sometimes with kids, you may be a little bit, that's not going to work, but well, they're going to learn, I mean, they think this is going to work. Okay. They think they're going to jump over this puddle, and they're not going to jump over it, and they're going to get all wet and messy. And okay, well, there you go. See, now you learned. You were overconfident, whatever. You were arrogant, whatever. Okay, good. You learned your lesson. See, so concern doesn't necessarily have to have a negative emotion. I can be concerned and amused at the same time. But concern just means that I have an earnest interest in what's going on, right? An earnest interest. Worry is when I add a negative feeling to that, an unpleasantness to this, a stress to this, and that is a poor intent, yes? So I can be concerned and cautious without being worrisome and anxious. Two different things. When we start to separate it out, it's a very fine distinction, but it's a very important distinction. Very, very big deal. So yeah, we don't want to add to negative intent. And this is, to me, to show my caring through worrying and anxiety. No, show it through concern and caution and preparedness and action. If you are concerned, say something, do something, right? If you can't do anything, well, okay, then there's not much you can do, and you just have to accept it. That's it, I mean, I'm concerned that it's going to rain later, and I have to go out. Well, I get an umbrella. If you don't have an umbrella, well, then you're just out of luck for being unprepared. You just have to accept the negative consequence. That's all, right? So we have to be a bit real here with stuff. Sometimes there's nothing you can do, and you just have to accept it. That's the end of the story. And that's what anxiety and worry tries to avoid. They refuse to deal with the awful truth. Sometimes, as they say, shit happens, and you just got to say, well, that's life. Stuff happens. It's no point in worrying about it. It doesn't change what happens. It just actually makes it worse, right? So getting sympathy, avoiding incompetence, avoiding awful truths. So this is all part of the same logic here, right? The avoiding awful truth, this is a really, really, really potent understanding. When we really understand how detrimental avoiding the awful truth is, we understand the power, the absolute power, the real power of honesty and self-honesty. You cannot actually avoid the awful truth. You can try to, but it doesn't work. And the more you try to do it, the more you run away from it. And we all know about denial and avoidance and all of this stuff. Does it ever work? I mean, you guys, you can share there, right? Tell me people that you know or yourselves when you've engaged in denial. Did it really work? Were you able to truly deny the reality of things? I mean, did it really help you? No. In the longer term, it didn't. It may have fooled you in a time for thinking that it helped, but no, it doesn't help, right? So it's just BS. Again, it's BS. And that's just the universe, life. It's all about learning and growing and being more aware, being more sensible, and being more deliberate, all of this, right? So any avoidance, any denial, it's just you're going against life itself. How does that make any sense whatsoever? So when you deal with the awful truth, you're learning what you really need to learn. And it's only awful because you've got a big ego, typically. Okay, there are some awful truths like, the terrible things that people do in the world, all the bad and evil things that people do. But also, this is about being aware that these things exist. You trying to deny and not deal with it, what? Suddenly it doesn't exist? That there's not people abusing children and animals and whatever. No, it exists. Be real, right? And either you got to learn to live with it, or you got to make an effort to do something about it. Either way, right? Or both. So you've got to be real. If you're not real, you're going to live a miserable life, right? Because it all compounds on each other. So this avoiding awful truths, it's a big topic. And I just want to mention it here as a payoff for anxiety and worry. And because if I'm all worried and anxious about it, it's a way of not dealing with it. Because there's this belief, this idea that if I'm worried, that's a doing. It's a terrible doing. It's not a real doing. It's a bogus BS doing. Yes. So this is very, very powerful. Very, very powerful to understand this. You can't avoid the awful truth. And here's the magic thing of this, right? Cheryl you know this, Bina, you know this, you've dealt with this, we've gone into this in Way of Impeccability in a big way. Yes, that when we truly first you got to face it, face the awful truth, and then deal with the awful truth. What happens? It transforms. It becomes the awesome truth. Yes. So this is the way the thing works. Yes, it's a hurdle, it's an obstacle, and it's a lot of stress and struggle initially. But if you really go into it and you do it, you say, wow, you know what? That wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. Our ideas are the worst thing, right? Ideas that are empty fears. That's it. Fear is an idea. When we understand that, it's a very big difference, right? Because look at the lion tamer, right? So when I come near a lion, I'm like, whatever. I'm all afraid. But the lion tamer is not. Same lions. Well, how come the lion tamer is not afraid? Right? They might be cautious, and they, of course, any lion tamer will tell you, you've got to be exceedingly cautious and careful. You make one mistake, and that can be the end of you. You've got to maintain that careful balance. But they can't have fear, and if they do have fear, of course, the animal sense it, and as soon as you have fear, you become prey. Right? That's one of the conditioning is that way. Right? As soon as you run away or you have fear, that means you prey. So you make your fear actually creates the problem. So my point that I'm trying to say is that fear is again, it's like worry. It's an emotional reaction that we do not have to have. Look at the firemen. They run into the fire, not away from it. They've learned to deal with their fear. Does it mean they aren't cautious and careful? Hell no. That's all their training is about, being super careful and cautious and being aware of the dangers. And at some point they say, I've got to get the hell out of here. The place is going to collapse. And of course they will run out there, right? I mean, they're not stupid either, but they are able to understand that they do not need to be debilitated by that negative emotionality, which is fear. Caution and carefulness, that's a very different thing to fear. Fear is a negative reaction, a negative emotionality to a real danger, right? So we can respond to danger with fear or with caution or with carefulness, preparedness, all sorts of different ways to respond to danger. Yes, and the same thing with anxiety and worry. It's an inappropriate way of responding to possibility, because that's what worry is. It is insisting on negative possibility rather than the whole range of possibility. Could be negative, could be positive. So this is very powerful, very, very important to understand that we can't avoid awful truths. So another payoff is concern expression, right? People want to show they're concerned and they want to prove that they are concerned. This is a very big payoff. Insurance, right? Worrying and anxiety, one of the payoffs for it is it's kind of an insurance. Because if you do screw up and you do fail, well, you see, I told you, right? And so you kind of but buffered for that. So validation, being right, ego, low energy, effort avoidance, laziness. There's a whole bunch of these. I'm going to put this up on the screen share again, so we can go through these, because they're all part of the same theme, right? And you start to see. So I'm just going to read through these, and then I'm going to get to Girish's point that she brought up there. It's not directly related, but it also is, right? And I'll connect it, and we'll see how it works. So these are all these payoffs, right? Laziness, a connection buffer, an emotional wall, emotional blackmail, control, cueing, bonding, disguised gossip, misery loves comfort, excuse of non-creativity. That's a big one. A lot of people who aren't creative and who have no ideas, who are basically empty. Well, one thing I can do is worry. And they're so concerned about their egos that they never learn stuff. And of course, because they never learn stuff, they end up being empty. So they have to find some way to compensate for that. Right? Distraction from real stuff, avoidance of actual doing, preparation for the worst. Things can only get better. Cleverness, hierarchy. Anyway, all the stuff. I'm not going to go through it all. You can look at the slide, and pull it up yourself. But it's well worth seeing. And I made this list super extensive to show that there are many, many reasons for these things, right? And just because your reason isn't on this list doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But I tried to be as thorough as I possibly can, right? So there's a lot of stuff here, right? And to understand that we do things for silly reasons and we think they're valid. But when you zoom out a little bit and you see a bigger picture, then you realize, well, not really. right? And then it unhooks us for this. Yeah, they are, exactly. So be aware does not mean action to be rushed. No, Norma, not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, when we do, the more aware we are, the more we see that we have time. So take this, for instance, in sports, right? When you watch professionals play compared to amateurs, you'll see that a professional, because they know what they're doing and they've made the effort to learn their craft, they learn their task, right? And they have awareness about what it is that they're doing. Because they have more awareness, in real time, things for them are slower because they don't have to process a zillion things. They're there in the moment and they can respond immediately. They're not thinking about what they need to think about. They're not thinking about how they're going to look. They're not thinking, that's it. They can just do. So where the more aware you are, the time goes the same, but your reaction to the time, it seems like it's slower. So the more aware you are, the more reaction time we have, the more response time we have, right? And when you're aware, you don't just react like typically. Okay, let's just say somebody comes up to you and says something mean to you, right? If you in a bubble and you're in that, defending your ego and all this, you just react and you say something nasty back. But if you're aware and you say, well, okay, what's going on here? Well, all right, this person is very insecure. I threaten them, etc. Now I don't have to say anything. I don't have to be rushed. I can take my time. I can take a power pause, think about what I want to say. There's no hurry, right? So awareness tends to slow us down, not in making us slow, but it prevents us from that unnecessary rushing, because it's not always necessary. It's very seldom necessary, actually. And when you are aware, when you do need to act, you will act, because you're not spending your time dithering and thinking about this and that. And it's like, oh, this is, I need to do, you know what, the building's on fire, I need to run outside. I use that example because, as stupid as that sounds, sometimes buildings start to catch alight and people smell the smoke and say, it must be the neighbor. They don't want to acknowledge the awful truth that it could be their house, right? So they hope it's just the neighbor burning leaves or whatever. And they sit there and it gets worse and worse. Oh, wow, they must have, had something go on in the kitchen or whatever. They make all these excuses. And by the time that they realize, oh, wow, this is actually really happening, it's kind of too late. And then they get caught in the fire. This happens all the time. People don't want to acknowledge the awful truth until it's too late, when they're forced to acknowledge it. And then, of course, it's too late. Another reason for learning to deal with the awful truth. And then, too, Norma, they can't make decisions. People get caught up in fires, right? So let's say the fire is all around you. And again, awful truth, right? So the only way to get out of the room is to run through the fire to get outside, or jump out of a window or something, right? Even if it's a ground floor window, people don't want to jump through glass, right? So they panic. And because the panic is they cannot decide on one decision. There is no best decision. They're all crap decisions. You're either going to jump through the glass and get cut by the glass, or you're going to run through the fire and get burnt or whatever. They're all terrible decisions, but they're all better than getting burnt. But because they can't find the best decision in their minds, poor thinking, sloppy thinking, they run around in circles. Literally, they stand there dithering and they run around in circles and they panic and they can't do anything and they end up burning to death. It's a really terrible, sad situation. Really sad. It's really horrible, right? So we have to understand this and be very careful. Sometimes, hey, you just got to make the decision, take the awful decision. Doesn't matter. Any of them is better than the one that you got. It's not about the best decision. It's about not insisting on the worst decision, right? so so it's a big deal. But the more aware you are, the more time you have, because you're not consumed with all sorts of nonsense running through your head, right? So when we have all of this unresolved issues, insecurities, doubts, fears, worries, anxieties, they take up processing power, and they therefore slow down time, right? Not literally, but perceptually slows down time, right? Your head is all filled with stuff like a computer. You want to get something done on your computer and you suddenly start up, 20, 30 programs. Oh, your computer's going to slow down. People are the same way. So awareness says, I don't need this. I don't need this. I've taken care of this. This is resolved. That's it. And the more aware you are, the less of those little sub-programs you need to run. Very helpful. Very, very helpful. All right. So let's look at what Girish asked there. Where did the comments go now? Sorry, Girish, it only shows me the last couple of comments. For whatever reason, I can't see more. I don't know why it cuts them off, but doesn't matter. Okay. I'll find it though. So you're talking about self-talk specifically, and then okay. Let me find it. Let me find that. I do. That was a very potent point you made, or question you asked, Girish, or request, I should say. Yeah, I don't know why it's not showing me all the comments. It's because it's live, I guess. So you just have to ask your make your comment again, please, Girish, or just copy paste what you said before. Just put it in there again. So. I lost your comment too, Ramsey. I wonder why I can't see this. This is kind of bothersome. I do want to see all these. There must be a way to do it. I tried clicking on the video now. Let's see. Let's see. But self-talk, essentially, this is what we say to ourselves. So I do want to make a big point about self-talk. Yes, yes. So Ramsey makes a good point here before we get back to Girish. We should differentiate a bit between worry and anxiety in normal people and the fake worry some people with mental issues of many kinds, like narcissism, use as gaslighting to manipulate while they're in fact more numb than worried. Correct. So yes, I'm talking about, in the typical instance, anxiety and worry. Yes, many narcissists will pretend it to be all worrisome, but that's narcissism in general. It's a whole other world. And yes, I have the whole book about it, and yeah, we can get into detail that, but that's a whole different course. I have a course on it, by the way, Ramsey, very extensive, detailed course on it's all about the psychology of the superiority paradigm, to truly understand the psychology. And I mentioned preposterousness earlier. That's the first main chapter, the first big point of understanding when it comes to narcissists and manipulators, abusers, gaslighters. All of that's all under the same heading. And they are preposterous. They do many, many things that are preposterous, and they get away with it because the typical average, normal, good person, they cannot comprehend that somebody could be that preposterous. It's not real to them. And because it's just impossible that somebody could do that for a normal, regular, good person, they don't see it as a reality, right? And they can't see it, they don't perceive it. It's very, very poor. So Girish says, self-talk and overthinking. All right. So a key with self-talk is that I call them shadow thoughts. This is a very big point. So when we're talking to ourselves inside our heads, inside ourselves, right, those thoughts, typically we believe them to be valid, but we don't necessarily check them or test them. And this is when you do make that effort to actually test and check these ideas and beliefs and thoughts that you just, well, that sounds good to me. And you don't even say that to yourself. You just think it and you just accept it. That's it. You don't go any further. And some of those are things like worry, right? But if you say it out loud, which is why repeatbacks and takeaways are so important when you do the programs that I have, right? I ask the participants, they've got to do repeatbacks and takeaways, because the moment you express these things, you realize, oh, now that I've got it written down here, now that I hear myself saying it, it's very different to what was inside my head, right? So inside my head, I'm worrying about something, I'm all anxious. But when I say it, I realize how ridiculous it sounds, right? Shadow thoughts, self-talk can be complete bogus nonsense. Yet we don't know it's bogus nonsense because internally, inside the bubble, it all makes sense inside the bubble, right? And take madness and insanity, right? This is exactly what madness is and insanity. People get trapped in a bubble, and everything inside that very narrow context of what they're saying, it all self-reinforcing, and it all makes sense within the bubble. But of course, it's a bubble, right? It's like things make sense inside a movie, but in real life, it's not going to make any sense at all because it's a fantasy movie, right? Science fiction movie. There's no magic in the real world, but in the movie, it all makes sense that, well, I'm going to use magic to get out of trouble. All right. See, but if you're caught in an insanity where you believe magic is real, well, of course, then you're going to have that problem. So this is very important to understand that our self-talk can fool us. We don't think we're in a bubble. We don't realize we're in a bubble, but we just accept, we just assume that these thoughts in our heads make sense. How often do you actually finish those thoughts? Most people do not. In the same way, if you listen to people, they don't actually finish their sentences either. So one of the techniques for self-improvement, a profound technique, is finish your sentences and finish your thoughts. Absolutely make that effort to finish your thoughts. Don't assume that because they started off sensible, that they're going to end sensibly. No, not necessarily at all, right? So when we realize this and see that, wow, you know what? When I start to actually think it through to the end, we now have a very, very different logic. Yes? Yeah. So when we understand self-talk, this power. Norma says, I'm just seeing your comment now about worrying about comments. No, I'm not worrying. I'm not worried. So I want to go further with self-talk, because self-talk is a big deal on the internet, especially with affirmations. And this is interesting. Somebody, one of the participants of Way-of-Impeccability was on earlier this thing, and we were going over all of this. And I asked them, what's going on with you? What are you doing? And they said, I wrote down all the stuff, and they had all these affirmations. I am confident. I am okay. I don't know. I can't even remember all the things that they said, right? But I just remember the one stuck in my head that was, I am confident, because that's the one we talked about. So I didn't want to pay too much attention to this. Now, the idea on the internet is, with affirmations, is that if you change your internal self-talk and you say all these positive affirmations, this is going to change you. Sadly, it does not, right? It can, but it sometimes has counterproductive consequences. It does the very opposite. And here's why. Point number one of the tasks of doing. Point number one was honesty and self-honesty. If I'm not confident and I go around saying, oh, I'm confident, I've got an internal censor inside me, my conscience. I call them the inner bureaucrats, right? They're going to say, no, you're not. And you say, oh, I'm confident. Well, and I say, no, you're not. Right. And so you're lying. And all that you end up doing is, if you are concerned about this, you don't want to be a phony, you just end up feeling like a liar. And that's why most people end up giving up on those affirmations, and they don't work for most people, right? Because they feel like a phony. If you make peace with that, well, now you've learned to be a phony. How does that help you? It doesn't. There's a very, very simple way to deal with this, right? Very simple. All you need to do is tweak the thing just very slightly, shift it. So let's say you want to learn to be confident, or you want to get rid of your anger, right? So, okay, I'm working on my confidence. I'm working on my anger. I'm actually doing something about it. All you've got to say for your affirmation is, instead of saying, I am confident, and having this, going from 0 to 100, as it were, go from 0 to 1. Go the very next step. Say rather in your self-talk, I am more confident than I was before. Doesn't matter by how much, that is true. Your internal bureaucrats say, yes, they're working on their confidence, and they are slightly more confident than they were before. It doesn't matter whether it's slightly or a lot, you are more confident. That's technically true, right? So if you say, I'm more confident than I was, I'm getting more and more confident, I'm less and less angry. If you make this in a progression of change, now you are saying the truth. And each day, it's relative to the day before. It's progression, it's change. Now, there's another really powerful point to this, because each day you say that, and it's true. The more true it becomes, the more you say, oh, you know what? At some point, you may start off and say, I'm more confident than I was. Actually, that really means I'm just less unconfident than I was. Yes. So I'm still very unconfident, but I'm just less unconfident. It's still in a negative space. But at some point, you're going to get to that 0 where you actually now, for real, a little bit confident, right? Now you say, wow, you know what? I am actually starting to be confident. And think of this from a point of view of emphasis. So we have to understand, emphasis literally changes the brain. rewires the brain, because emphasis is you telling your brain this is important. Yeah. So if you going to say, I'm confident, and well, I just feel like a liar, you emphasizing lying, and it doesn't work. See? So you can do that. But when you're emphasizing just that slight change every day, you emphasizing change. This is profound. This is profound. Yes. I don't know. Cheryl may have this on a wall. I know many of the participants have made a poster out of it to put up on their walls to say, I have changed. Therefore, I can change. Therefore, I will change, because I make an effort to do so, because I want to do so, because I intend it. But the key is, once you have changed, it's, well, I can change, right? How many people involved in self-improvement don't believe they can change? This is the number one issue for many people when it comes to self-improvement. They don't think they can change. Yeah, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, whatever, right? They have terrible self-images. And the gap between where they are and the end point is so huge, they get overwhelmed. Because that was the other point, right? Overwhelmed, you said. So this is the point. When you start to say, well, I'm patient, and you really think about what being patient truly means, and you are an impatient person. You say the difference between my impatience and actually being patient, it's like, man, this is too far away, and you get overwhelmed because it's too big a gap. However, if you want to literally walk from one end of the country to the other, you do it one step at a time, correct? And people have walked all around the world. It can be done, right? It doesn't take all that long, by the way. It takes I think I looked it up. It's less than a year to walk around the world. It's quite amazing, right? And anyway, my point is, you do it one step at a time. That's how you avoid overwhelm. Do it one step at a time. So when it comes to self-talk, if you're going to go from 0 to 100 to the end point, like, oh, I'm confident. No, this is a long journey. It's BS that you're going to go there just in one jump, right? Do it incrementally, and then you won't get overwhelmed. So this is very, very, very important to understand, that if we break it down into the small steps and change, especially if you can say every day, I have changed, I'm making progress. And of course, we also understand that learning is not linear, it's exponential. Now, yes, okay, people will say, don't use big words. I can't help it. There's no other way around it. Linear is 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. That's linear, right? Just steady progression. But that's not how learning works. When you learn, it connects to other things, and those things connect to more things. So learning is exponential. In other words, it goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, and so on, right? That's it. It's exponential. And an exponential curve, if you actually look at it, it's kind of very, very slight movement. And at the bottom, it almost looks like the line is flat, but actually it's slightly on a slight up curve, slight up, and then it gets over here, and then it goes up like that, right? So exponential starts off slowly, but at some point it kicks in fast. Like literally, if you took 1 penny a day, 1 penny, and the next day you went to 2 pennies, like I said, oh, I'm going to pay you 1 penny a day, and then tomorrow I'll pay you 2 pennies, and the day after I'll pay you 4 pennies. Or I can pay you monthly, and I can give you, let's say, $10,000 for the month. You say 1 penny a day, 2 pennies, 4 pennies, and you can sit and work it out. I think after 2 weeks, you're going to have like, I don't know, $14 or $28 or something. He said, no, I'd rather take the 10,000. I said, well, I'll give you 100,000. Yeah, okay, still doesn't seem right. I'll take the 100,000. The pennies doesn't seem like I'm getting there, right? But if you actually work it out, I think you end up with like $10 million. Like you end up with like 100 billion pennies, something like that. I forget, it's a lot, right? At the end of the month. In other words, exponential starts slowly, but it ends crazy, right? So we understand this with learning too. We've got to stick with our learning. We've got to stick with our learning, because, of course, if you stop that exponential growth, you have to start all over again. And then you just go back to 1 and 2, and you just end up with a few pennies, right? So we have to stick with our learning. We have to stick with our learning. And when it comes to self-talk and change, this is very, very, very important, right? Very critical, Girish. So I'm making this to tie it all together. When I'm looking to change, let's say, confidence or patience or anger, and I'm saying, I'm working on my anger, I'm doing stuff every day to work on my anger, I'm doing stuff to work on my patience, and I can genuinely, legitimately say, well, you know what, I'm just that little bit more patient today than I was yesterday. I'm a little bit less angry or more in control of my anger than I was. That's incremental change. But those increments, it's also exponential. So as you go on, it gets better and better. When you start to get, well, you know what, I really am confident. Now you have that emphasis that's added to it. Now that's a genuine, real, true point of awareness, of realization. Wow, I really have changed. When you have those realizations, you're saying to yourself, I can change. And then it starts to build on itself, right? And then it starts to go a lot quicker. But you got to put the work in first. So your self-talk needs to be honest. There's no other way around it. Self-honest, right? Not honest to other people. I know many people who are honest, but with other people, I trust them with anything. But with themselves, not so much, right? So self-honesty and honesty, not always the same thing. You need to be self-honest as well as honest. Yeah. It helps for me, Cheryl says, it helps for me when my self-talk includes the intent of practicing, capitals, all caps, practicing. I am practicing patience. I am practicing appreciation and so on. For me, it proposes that all I intend to be is on an ongoing journey of learning and growth. Yes. And by practicing, Cheryl means this particularly. It's a word we put into our dictionaries of power, right? It's in Way-of-Impeccability. It's a big deal. It's a major power conception. Capital P practice. What does capital P practice means? It means I am deliberately going to engage in doing something that I know I cannot do 100%. So in other words, I'm deliberately going to be doing things in an incomplete way. I'm going to deliberately be wrong in some way, right? So when I practice my violin, right, until I'm a master wizard at it, well, I'm playing it wrong, whatever I'm practicing, correct? Think about that. Practicing is deliberately being wrong in some way, not entirely, but in some way. Yeah. But we need to do this with things like our patience, with things like being more confident. I've got to go and practice it. So what am I doing when I'm practicing? I'm practicing my music. I'm experimenting. I'm testing. I'm looking at where the boundaries are. I play the note. Okay, that's not how I do it. That's not how I do it either. So I learn by not doing. This is how we learn. But if we're too hung up on getting it wrong, you're never going to practice. You're never going to test. You're never going to fail. And well, you're never going to learn. If you can't fail, you're never going to learn. To me, there's no such thing as failure. It's just complete rubbish. It's just alternate learning, right? When I play those bad notes, I'm not failing. I'm learning. I'm learning how to play it because I test, I angle it a little bit more, a little faster, slow, whatever. I change something and, that's how you do it, right? That's it. I'm not failing. I'm learning. That's what learning is. Learning is doing things until you figure out what works, right? Trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. So we need to have this ability to implement trial and error. It's very important. So that's capital P practice. And it's deliberately doing things so that you say, what's the reality of doing this as opposed to the idea? How many times didn't you have an idea of doing something and then when you actually did it, it was like, oh my goodness, wow, now that I do it, it's completely different to what I thought it was. That's what practice is. It's preparation. And once you practice things, you get the confidence to do it because, well, I've done it. I've proven to myself that I can do it. Without that self-proof, it never really becomes yours, right? So you can learn things, but they come from outside you or wherever, but you don't really own it until you've proven to yourself that you can do it. Yes. So practice is absolutely critical for 101 different reasons. Yeah. Sometimes it can be a background hum as opposed to a quick action. Yes. So capital P practice is super, super potent. So this is absolutely important. And especially in the context of our self-talk, right? If you're not going to apply what you're talking about, if you don't practice it, you don't implement it, that self-talk is just BS. It's not self-talk, it's self-BS. It's just how, exactly, it's like, as Norma says, it's just this background hum. Yeah, it needs to be action, not just a hum. It doesn't have to be a quick action, but it doesn't be this background in, you're just believing yourself. Right now, we have good reasons sometimes. There's no reason to doubt myself. I truly believe the thing that this idea that's running into my head is legitimate. That's why I call them shadow thoughts, because the moment you express them and they hit the light, well, what happens to a shadow when you put a light? It goes away, right? So that's why we need to practice it, express it. And sometimes, practicing is just a matter of expressing it sometimes, putting it out there so that you can get some reflection, some perspective on yourself. So be very, very cautious with your self-talk. Furthermore, one more point on self-talk. This comes up all the time, and there is a specific model module in Way of Impeccability about self-talk. And this is pay exquisite attention to your self-talk, right? So listen to your friends, listen to what they say. Oh, you know what? I'm such a warrior. And they mean warrior with an O, not with an A, right? What are you doing, person? What are you doing when you say that? Oh, I'm such a warrior. You are making a statement about yourself. I am someone who worries, right? I'm a warrior. I am someone who worries. Now, because you're a good person and a genuine person, and you have some measure of honesty about yourself, you cannot say that if it was a complete lie, right? You believe it to be true in some way. But in the beginning, it may just be more or less true. But because you want to be genuine and real, you're going to make that statement true so that you're not a liar and a phony, right? So be careful what you say. You're going to try and make it true. I am are the two most powerful words in any language. The moment you say, I am whatever, yourself, your inner brain, your deeper self, your subconscious, whatever you want to call it, is going to make an effort to make that statement true, because that is something that I do have power over. Yeah. So I'm going to try and make it true. And this is sort of where affirmations came about. But you have to be very careful. We can easily make negative true. It's not so easy to make positive true, because a negative is just destructive. It's negative, it's breaking down. It's much easier to be true. But a positive, you have to build, you have to learn, you have to practice, you have to experiment, you have to test and try. So to say I am in a negative, you can go there fairly easy. But to say I am in a positive, this requires work and effort. And if you're not going to put in the work and effort, you're not going to get there. You're just going to end up biasing yourself, and you end up being a phony. So when it comes to your self-talk, be exquisitely careful. Now, let's say you've been a worry pot, and legitimately say, you don't have to say, I am a worry pot. You can say, I have been a worry pot. You may still be a worry pot, but to say I have been is true, correct? In the past, you were a worry pot. That's absolutely 100% true. But if you say I am, it may be true in this moment. But by implication, the words I am imply it's ongoing, it's future continuous, if you want to be technical in a grammatical sense, right? So when I say I am a worry pot, it's true now, but it implies I'm also going to continue to be so. So rather say it in the past tense. I was a worry pot. That's true. I may still be, that's also true, but I'm changing. So am I as much a worry pot as I used to be? No. So be exquisitely precise with your language, right? So don't go around making these statements about yourself, which lock you into a future, right? Like I am a worry pot, I'm an angry person, I'm a this, I'm a that. Don't box yourself, right? This way, it also attaches to your self-conception. The way we conceive of ourselves is absolutely critical. If you think of yourself as a negative, worrisome person, as feeble, as weak, well, that's how you're going to be. But again, if you are overconfident like a narcissist, you go to the other extreme. Have an open-ended conception, like I'm somebody who can learn. That's it. I like learning. I want to learn. This doesn't lock me into anything, right? It doesn't limit me. I'm not saying that I have to be my crappy self. No, I've learned. I've moved on from being very crappy. I'm just less crappy now. I'm less unaware as I used to. But it's open-ended because I can learn, right? I can grow. I can change. Have this as a self-conception rather than self-conceptions that box you and limits you. I'm this kind of, I'm a black and white type of a person. Or you know what, I'm a mother, I'm a father. Those are all limiting things. Yes, you can be a mother, but it's part of your biggest self-conception, because you can be a mother and you can be, a joyful person. You can be innocent and sophisticated all at the same time. You can be a spirit warrior. You can be a power learner. You can be all sorts of wonderful magic things, right? So don't limit yourself with your self-talk and your self-conception. Self-talk is very, very dangerous when it is limiting like that, when you start boxing yourself and defining yourself. Don't define yourself. Conceive of yourself. Conceptions are open. They connect to everything. Definitions are tight and limited. Don't box yourself by a self-definition. Free yourself with a self-conception and find a self-conception that's open-ended, that changes and grows as you go along and allows for change and growth. Does that make sense? Irish? So Ramsey says one should pay attention to what he lets in, or she, what they let in, as most of it could be negative. Exactly. Filtering information that gets in is crucial before positive self-talk. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is part of where we are in our greater progression here. We're learning to think for ourselves. This is part of those self-talk. Self-talk, when it's inside your head, it's shadow thoughts. When you put it out there, you're testing it. You're checking it to see if it's actually valid, right? And part of that is thinking things through to the end. Whenever you see me write that, you'll see thinking things through, and to the end is in all caps, because you've got to shout it. You've got to finish your thoughts to the end. You've got to go all the way, because you can work out the things. And you see this a lot of times with these conspiracy theories and stuff. It all makes sense, except when you get, and 90% of it, it's like, I see, oh yeah. But then when you get to the end, it all implodes and collapses. But you got to go that last little bit, right? So it's like, I believe there's Atlantis is east of me, right? I keep going east. Well, it's just a little bit further until I get to the ocean. Well, okay, there's no city yet. It's just all ocean. Well, all right. And the same thing. Well, it's across the ocean, nothing there. You have to get to the end before you can say it cannot be here, because I've gotten all the way to the end, right? As long as you're not at the end, it could still be in that last little bit, and you can still believe the BS, right? So we have to go all the way to the end to prove it doesn't exist, right? And I'm not saying Atlantis doesn't exist for all the conspiracy theorists out there. It might. I don't know. I haven't explored everywhere yet. So, yeah. So this paying attention to details and filtering is absolutely critical. Yes, exactly. Very, very, very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful. So self-talk is a huge deal to understand also. Right? To summarize self-talk. Self-talk is power. It's real power. And like any power, we have to be exceedingly cautious with power, because power is easy to corrupt. And this is what happens with self-talk. Listen to the things that people say about themselves. It's going to blow your mind when you actually stop and listen the things that they say and the power they wield over themselves and how they box and limit themselves. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to be horrible. Truly, you're going to be horrified when you hear your friends, the things they say. You say, oh, crikey, you know what? I'm doing the same thing. This is terrible. And it will really, hopefully it will scare you out of not saying these things about yourself, because they just tie you in and box you in. So self-talk is a power, and it can corrupt you, right? So use that power sensibly. Use it with sobriety. Use it with care. Use it impeccably. Yes, it is a creative power too. Exactly. I mean, and this is the thing with creativity, that, no artist, all right, let's say, I shouldn't say no artist, but when like writer's block or artist's block, what happens is they have a dialogue inside, and they're looking to do things perfectly. They're doing things, they're not looking to learn, they're looking to start somewhere and see where it leads. So their self-talk says, well, I'm stuck. And the more they say I'm stuck, the more, of course, they have to prove that they're stuck to themselves, and then they actually get stuck. And it becomes this loop that reinforces itself, right? You can really clearly see this. Whereas they could have just changed their self-talk, instead of trying to write the perfect thing, trying to paint the perfect picture, song, whatever. Just say, okay, I'm going to start with any rubbish and just improve it and see where it goes. When you do that, it's astonishing how creative you can be, right? But you got to free up your internal image. Janet says, there is a planet where it is said a little prince exists, or is it a conspiracy? It's not a conspiracy necessarily, Janet, but it is most certainly a collaboration where that little prince exists because we deem the little prince to exist. It's our choice, right? So we can choose to have that planet exist. It's our choice. We can create many things. So this is the power of creativity and our language. Yes, we can make it happen because we want it to be. Some things do not actually need to be literally real for them to exist. Yes, I mean, show me the physical example of love, right? You can't put love in your hands and say, here you go, soul, yes, love, right? It doesn't exist physically, but yet it exists. So many things exist figuratively, metaphorically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and they are profoundly real, right? Self-doubt, trust, patience, right? Confidence. All of these things are profoundly affecting. They're very real, but they don't have a physical substance. So likewise, the little prince is real without necessarily having physical substance. It's real because you decide for it to be real. You choose for it to be real. And you can have others collaborate with you in this, right? You don't have to do it on your own. Does that make sense, Janet? I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. Very cool. I love the comments. I love the discussion. This is just too magical to me. It's really, really profound. It's a really big deal. So worry is a large extent an internal self-talk. To connect now back to our theme, which is anxiety and worry and the payoffs for it. So when you start to look at these payoffs, they are those shadow thoughts. You think you're getting a benefit, but if you actually explore it and you think it through to the end, you're going to see it's not there. So I challenge anybody with worries, write out your worries, right? Write it out as a list, not just as a list, but take each one and say, why is this valid? How real is this worry? How legitimate is this worry? How substantiated is this worry? Right? So, oh, you know what? I see, Margaret and Billy are getting married. Oh, I don't think this is going to work. Based on what? Based on what? You're just saying it. What do you have to base this on? Do you have any real insight into their psychologies? Is anybody ever able to predict a marriage? Well, okay, you can say, well, it's not going to work because most, whatever, let's say 60% of marriages end in divorce. Well, okay. It doesn't mean this specific one is going to do. You could say, well, the odds are against them, but they could as well be the ones to defy them. In other words, you don't really know. You're just talking out of your ass, right? So when you start to say, maybe you have a very real reason for it, okay, then it's not a worry. Then it's a concern. Then it's a legitimate point. Like, well, this and that, but you still never know. I've seen, marriages, especially, or people being together, whether they're married or not. The most unlikely of people end up staying together and having a happy relationship, right? You never know. So what are you worried about, really? And why are you not, whenever you say, well, I don't think it's going to work, if you were to say, I think it's going to work, you have as much reason to say, I think it's going to work as it's not going to work, right? It's kind of 50-50. So why bother? What are you doing it for? And we get back to our payoffs, because it makes you seem clever. It makes you seem protective. If it doesn't work, you can say, see, right? Well, you can just might as well do it as a positive. If you say it's positive and it works, well, then you say, see, I told you. And if it doesn't work, so what, right? But again, of course, with worry and negative, if it's working and you say, well, you just wait and see. See, you have that safety. It's easier to predict something negative because it can always collapse, right? But once it's collapsed, then it can't work again because it's already collapsed. So statistically, you get that odd of being right. But people are concerned about being right over being accurate and being sensible and being positive. That's a very poor trade-off. It's a very, very, very poor payoff. So it's very lame, very, very lame. So this worry is a kind of a self-talk. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's a shadow thought. So write them out, take it to the end, see how valid it really is. And if your concern is truly valid, well, then do something about it, right? I mean, if you truly concerned, you worried about your house catching fire, for instance. Well, you write it down. You say, well, why? Well, there's a lot of dry grass around the house and the electricity is bad. I see things sparking and whatever. Well, then do something about it. Clear away all that dry grass and leaves and bushes from around your house, right? Make it better safety. Fix the electricity. And if you can't, be really careful. I'm just saying, do something. And then, well, I've done everything. Okay, then I have to just accept this is what it is. All right, I have to take my chances. I mean, yes, I've cleared around my house, but I'm living in a forest. I can't clear the whole forest. If the forest catches fire, like a forest fire, well, then that's too bad. And I can't afford to move right now. Well, then I just have to accept this, right? So I have to just pay attention and whatever. So there's lots of things we can do. We're never quite as hopeless and helpless as we like to think we are. And if you are, well, then that's just tough luck. Life is that way. It's too bad. I have to accept it. No point in worrying about it, right? Make peace with things, right? It's like worrying about dying. You're going to die whether you worry or not. What's the point of worrying about it? Yeah, truly, answer that question for me. What's the point about worrying about death? Does it help? Has it helped anybody that you know of? Really? Has worrying about death helped anybody? Now, tell me any of you that you haven't worried about death. See, we can be silly for no good reason. Think it through to the end. When you think it through, there's no point in worrying about death. You're going to die whether you worry or not. So why worry? Why worry? Just habit, people, just habits. A poor, poor habit. And we think it makes us better. We think it makes us feel better when it doesn't. It's a false idea. It's a shadow thought. A shadow thought. And better ways to use your thinking. You can think affirmatively. You can think creatively. You can say, well, okay, I don't know what's going to happen with death. Is there something I can do about it? I don't know. Can I learn if there is something I can do? Yes, there is. This is what Way of Impeccability is all about. Way of Impeccability doesn't just help you to live a more profound life, a more purposeful life, a more meaningful life, a more significant life, a more deliberate life, a more joyful life, a more happy life, etc. I mean, I can go into many, many positive benefits, but also at the same time, it's preparing you for whatever existence you come into, right? So if there is something after death, you're going to be prepared because you developed your character, not specific skills. So tell me, in any type of existence that you could possibly imagine, any, right? Anybody, tell me where any existence you can imagine where patience is not going to be a valuable skill, where integrity is not going to be valuable to have, where having, you know, a sensibility, a sobriety, an ability to perspective shift, an ability to think things through, an ability to not be BSing yourself, an ability to be honest and self-honest. Tell me what kind of existence those particular skills are not going to be valuable. I don't care. Whatever possible reality you might fall into, those are valuable qualities. So if you're going to learn to live according to Way of Impeccability, you are going to be prepared for whatever comes. So what do I have to fear? Yeah, I'll deal with it. I have trust in my own sensibility, my own sobriety. Why? Because I've practiced it. I've proven it to myself. I've proven that I can have patience. I've proven to myself I have integrity. I've proven to myself that I can think about things, etc. Right? I've proven to myself I can deal with my emotions. I've practiced mood management and association, all of these skills. I mean, the Way of Impeccability is a huge program, right? So, you know, dealing with anxiety and worry is a very small part of that. But we want to go to the other side of it. Rather than eliminating the negatives, we want to implement the positives. Because when you do that, it automatically takes care of the negatives, right? This is the most powerful way of doing this. So, Janet, did that make sense, what I said about the little prince? I don't know if you're still with us or not. Anybody else have anything to add? I'd like to kind of wrap it up. I mean, I'm not in a hurry. We can keep going if somebody has something more to add. But, you know, on the point of payoffs, before I go to a complete new section on it, if there's anything more anybody would add. Girish, did I answer about self-talk? You said about overwhelm as well. So again, overwhelm is stimulated a lot by negative self-talk, by unfinished self-talk, by self-talks that's jumping. So you deal with overwhelm. Very simple way to deal with overwhelm, truly. And I don't want to sound like I'm just saying, oh, here we go, here's the magic bullet. But overwhelm is actually one of the few things that can be dealt with fairly easily and fairly simply. You just have to do one thing. So do the thing that's the easiest thing that you can do. So whenever you got all of these 100 ones, find the smallest, tiniest, easiest thing that you're actually able to do and do it. And then you repeat the process, right? So think about cleaning your house. Your house is a complete mess, right? Let's just say you had a flood or whatever, right? Whatever. It's a horrible mess and you now need to clean it, right? So, oh gosh, I'm overwhelmed. You know, this is a big job. This is a big task. You start and you clean 1 square, let's say 1 square inch, right? That's it. That's all you're going to clean. Can you do that? Yes, of course you can do that. Well, that was really easy. That was simple. Well, clean another inch. And then you clean another inch. Before you know it, you've cleaned a square foot. Well, was that a big deal? No, not really. I mean, anybody who's actually cleaned a square foot, right, it's like, well, it's only this big. It's like, that's no big deal. Well, do 10 of those. I got 10 square feet. Wow, oh, that's quite a big deal. It's still not a really big deal. Do 100 of those and then you clean the room. See? And well, tomorrow you do the same thing. And so, okay, it was no really deal because it's all a bunch of little deals, and they're not really a big deal. If you try to do it all at once, of course, it's too big a deal. But overwhelm, do it tiny little increments at a time. Because when you're focused on doing that little thing that's easy and you can do, it's not overwhelming. It cannot be because you know you can do it. It's easy. It's simple. Right? Very, very, very easy way to do it. Absolute pleasure, Norma. Absolute pleasure, Janet. Absolute pleasure. Janet, if you got some time, if you're going to be around, let me know, and then we'll continue with what we were doing. This will be very great. So I'll end it there. If nobody got anything else to add to this, but with overwhelm, just to end this on overwhelm, it's only overwhelming if you think of the totality. The way to do that is to focus on the detail and focus on what's easy and simple and doable. Right? Do what you can do, and you've been be surprised to do as you start doing things simpler because you're practicing. And also sometimes it's exponential, right? With cleaning, it's not necessarily exponential, but sometimes it is. Like when you start tidying things, say, well, I thought I had to do this all, but well, I don't really need to. And it just gets simpler as you go along. As anybody knows who's tackled big projects, the deeper you get into it, the easier it becomes. Quite profound. So very cool. Absolute pleasure, Norma and Janet and everybody. And thanks for being here, Errol. Thanks for being here, Ramsey. Thank you for coming, Girish. I'm just thrilled that you guys are here. It's really fun to hear from you and see. And I hope I got all the comments. Ramsey, I may have missed some of yours, but I hope I got them all. So this is very exciting. It's really fun. It's really fun to have these interactions and chats. It's very, very cool. So absolute pleasure, Cheryl. Absolute pleasure. Yes. Goodbye, everybody. So excited that you're here, Cheryl. Very cool. Very cool. I was thinking about you a lot yesterday, by the way, Cheryl. I don't know why you were deeply on my mind yesterday for some reason. So see, and that's how you're here today. So see how wonderful that is? It was good thoughts. I was just thinking good stuff about you. So very cool. Very cool. Wonderful. All right. I'll end it right there. All right. Bye, everybody. And all